In the dust of ages, long before the tales we tell today, there was an empire that rose from the cradle of civilization. Akkad, its cities were marvels of bronze and clay, its armies were unstoppable, and its kings declared themselves gods. But within the shadows of its grand ziggurats and bustling markets, the scribes, the keepers of history, whispered of a terror that didn't hunger for flesh or blood. They wrote of a creature born from ruin, a being that fed on the very memory of what was lost. They called it the Ash Eater. 4,000 years ago, the Akkadian Empire was at its zenith. But empires, no matter how mighty, are not immune to disaster. Great fires, whether sparked by war, accident, or the wrath of a scorned deity, would sometimes sweep through the great cities. And it was in the aftermath, when smoke still clung to the air like a shroud and the ground was a blanket of gray, that the Ash Eater would appear. Imagine the scene. A temple, once a vibrant center of worship, now a skeletal ruin. Its great wooden doors are gone, its idols toppled and blackened. As the survivors sift through the debris, hoping to salvage something, anything from the destruction, a movement catches their eye. From the deepest, most scorched part of the sanctuary, something stirs. It isn't a survivor. It isn't an animal seeking shelter, it is something else entirely. The scribes described it with a chilling clarity. Its body was said to be formed from cracked, baked clay like the bottom of a riverbed dried out by a merciless sun. It moved with a slow, deliberate crawl, its limbs scraping against the charred earth. It had no eyes to speak of, no face in the way we would recognize. There was only a single, dark orifice at its front, a circular maw that didn't roar or bite, but inhaled. It breathed in the embers, drawing the last vestiges of heat and light into its hollow form. It fed not on life, but on the absence of it. It consumed the end. The horror of the Ash Eater wasn't in what it did to the living, but what it left behind. Those who encountered it were often found days later, perfectly preserved. There were no marks of violence, no signs of a struggle. They lay peacefully as if they had simply fallen asleep amidst the ruins. But when the city's healers examined the bodies, they made a grim discovery. Their lungs, which should have been filled with air, were instead packed tight with cold, fine soot. It was as if their last breath had been stolen and replaced with the very ash the creature consumed. They hadn't been killed. Their life had simply been vacuumed away, leaving an empty vessel. What was this thing? The Akkadian priests debated its nature endlessly. Some believed it was a primordial spirit, an elemental force of decay given form. It was the universe's way of cleaning up, of erasing the past to make way for the new. Others saw it as a punishment from the gods, a divine scavenger sent to feast upon the arrogance of men who built their cities too close to the heavens. A more terrifying theory suggested it was a guardian, not of the sacred, but of the profane. It emerged from ruined temples because it was drawn to the desecration, protecting the memory of the fire itself. The most perplexing part of the legend is what happened after the creature fed. Once the last embers had cooled and the city began the arduous task of rebuilding, the Ash Eater would simply vanish. It didn't retreat into a cave or burrow into the earth. It dissolved. Like a mirage, it was there one moment and gone the next, leaving no trace of its existence, well, almost no trace. The scribes, the very people who chronicled its appearances, noted a peculiar phenomenon. The clay tablets on which they recorded the events, the ones stored in the rebuilt libraries and archives, would sometimes bear strange marks. The tablets that specifically mentioned the Ash Eater were found with their edges scorched, blackened as if licked by a flame. The cuneiform script near the edges would be blurred and distorted. It was as if the creature was reaching back through time, trying to consume the very history that dared to remember it. Even the memory of the Ash Eater was not safe from its hunger. It was a monster that devoured not just ash but its own legend. This fear of being forgotten, of having its story erased, led the scribes to take extraordinary measures. They began hiding the tablets that spoke of the Ash Eater. They created coded messages, allegories, and myths that hinted at its existence without ever naming it directly. They wove its story into cautionary tales about the dangers of fire and hubris, hoping to preserve the warning without attracting the creature's attention. And then, as the Akkadian Empire itself crumbled, turning to dust and memory, the stories of the Ash Eater faded with it. For millennia, the tales were lost, buried under the sands of Mesopotamia along with the cities that birthed them. When archaeologists in the 19th and 20th centuries began unearthing the great cities of Akkad, Ur, and Babylon, they found thousands of clay tablets. Among them were the fragmented, scorched-edge records that told the impossible story of a creature made of clay that ate fire. Modern historians, of course, have tried to rationalize the legend. They propose that the Ash Eater was a metaphor for the psychological trauma of surviving a devastating fire. The victims with lungs full of soot were likely just unfortunate souls who had succumbed to smoke inhalation. The cracked clay body could be a personification of the landscape itself, the baked and fissured ground of a fire-ravaged city. The scorching on the tablets? Probably just incidental fire damage, a coincidence that a superstitious ancient culture wove into their mythology. But is it that simple? The accounts are strangely consistent across different cities and different time periods within the Akkadian reign. The details are specific: the body of cracked clay, the inhaling mouth, the victims untouched but filled with soot. It's one thing to have a general myth about a fire demon. It's another to have such a unique and peculiar creature described so precisely by multiple sources. And what if it wasn't just a metaphor? Let's indulge in the terrifying possibility that the Akkadians were describing something real. A creature that operates on biological or physical principles we don't yet understand. An entity that thrives on high-carbon, low-energy matter. A being that, through some unknown process, could displace the air in a person's lungs with particulate matter. The legend leaves us with an unsettling question. If the Ash Eater of Akkad appears after great fires and vanishes when cities rebuild, where does it go? Does it truly cease to exist, or does it simply lie dormant, waiting? The Akkadian Empire is long gone, but humanity has not stopped building, and we have certainly not stopped fire. Our modern world is filled with cities of glass and steel, far grander than anything Akkad could have dreamed of. And we have witnessed fires on a scale that would have dwarfed the blazes of the ancient world. Think about the great fires of history: Rome, London, Chicago, Tokyo. Think about the devastating wildfires that now rage across entire continents. In the aftermath of these modern conflagrations, surrounded by acres of ash and ruin, could something be stirring? If a creature like the Ash Eater exists, our world would be a perpetual feast. Perhaps it has evolved. Maybe it no longer takes the form of cracked clay. Maybe it's more subtle now. Perhaps the feeling of emptiness and despair that hangs over a disaster zone isn't just psychological. Perhaps it's the presence of something feeding on the very energy of that loss. A psychic scavenger drawn to collective grief. The Akkadian scribes feared their history would be consumed. They wrote their warnings on clay, the most durable medium they had, and even then they feared it wasn't enough. Today, our history is written on fragile paper and in ephemeral digital code. How easily could our stories, our memories be turned to ash? How easily could we be forgotten? The legend of the Ash Eater is more than just a monster story from a long-dead empire. It's a 4,000-year-old warning. A reminder that some things don't want to be remembered, and that from the ashes of our greatest achievements, the forces of oblivion may be waiting to take their first breath. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the ancient world's darkest corners. If you enjoy exploring the myths and monsters that lurk in the shadows of history, be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more. Let us know in the comments what ancient terror you want us to uncover next. Until then, stay curious.